London calling YouTube, London calling everyone, and on this edition we have two guests that have never appeared before, making their debuts, therefore, on London After Midnight, all the way over in Canada. We have MidnyteGoddess, bonsoir madame.
Bonsoir mon ami.
And from all the way over there in Sydney, Australia, we have MilanJeftic. Good day, mate.
Quake in fear, for the Ravager has come. Hello,
I love
by the way.
Traditional Australian greetings. You can't beat them.
Yeah, of course.
Well, this is a somewhat historic edition because as of midnight last night, or should I say 12 this morning, same-sex marriage has been legal in England and Wales. And, there's actually been protests next door, as it were, in Ireland, where they're saying, why haven't we got this right then? Scotland has, now England and Wales has. The Irish want the right as well. It's protests entirely in favour, as far as I know. There'll be a backlash at some point. There are some conservative people. But I like to think that we are blazing the trail for Western Europe and hopefully other places as well. So, same-sex marriage, is it today the UK, tomorrow the world? And I've just realised I didn't ask you to each say something about yourself, but your new guests. So, MidnyteGoddess, if you could begin telling us one or two things about yourself. Also I meant to introduce Rob, who is a guest alongside MidnyteGoddess. Sorry about that, Rob. So, if you each say something about yourselves and then address the question, same-sex marriage, is it UK today, the world tomorrow?
Okay. Well, I'm MidnyteGoddess, and like Alex said, I am from Canada. I'm actually deaf. I speak French, English, sign language, Italian, Spanish, and I taught myself how to play the piano via vibration.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And Rob, introduce yourself.
I'm Rob. I'm from Canada. I'm MidnyteGoddess's worst half, I guess you could call me.
So the topic of same-sex marriage. Today the UK, tomorrow the world. Well, we've had same-sex marriage in Canada probably almost 10 years now.
Oh, wow. Is that every province?
And they did it province-wide from the get-go.
Wow.
And we haven't blown up or anything. Actually, our hate crimes have gone down. Assaults against homosexual, transsexual people have gone down drastically since we introduced all the legislation and gave everybody the same rights. So I think it's kind of cool that Ireland is going, well, what about us? You know, it's about time. I mean, we're 2014. It's a bit ridiculous that at this point we're still marginalizing people who, for no other reason than who they love. And I'm kind of I know a little bit more about this topic because I do have a homosexual father.
Yeah.
So obviously I do a lot of advocating because of that. So I think it's pretty cool, you know, that everyone's kind of catching up. I mean, we had the civil rights movement, we had, you know, the movement, the feminist movement, and now we have the gay rights movement. I think it's about time, and I think it's pretty damn good. And go Ireland for protesting that they don't have it, instead of protesting that people are getting it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rob, your thoughts?
I'm going to stay clear of this topic, please.
Oh, okay. So, Milan, first of all, if you could introduce yourself. I'm sure a lot of people listening will be familiar with you, but in your own unique style, introduce yourself and then offer your opinion on same-sex marriage and is it today the UK, tomorrow the world?
Certainly. My name is MilanJeftic. I am the sentient representation of... I'm the incarnation of a gibbering, insane, godlike creature that screams in the center of the universe and is kept at bay by two idiot flute players. I live in Liverpool, Sydney, Australia, in a ghetto with my father and little brother. And yes, I draw, I make videos, and as I mentioned before, gibber madly in the center of the universe.
Yes, it always gets me that you're of Russian-Serbian origin, raised in Australia and you live in Australia, and you sound as English as I do.
Well, the thing is, my accents are as varied and different and changeable like the wind. Like I said before, I'm a not exactly fully Euclidean sentient creature. Well, I am sentient, but I'm not going to go into the specifics of what I am. But yes, I think Ireland, if it wants the right for gay marriage, and I think that's fantastic. I mean, yes, there are people out there that like peepees, who happen to have peepees themselves. And yes, there are ladies out there who like other ladies. It's okay. And if they want to get married, don't worry. It won't offend God. You know why? 'Cause he doesn't exist. Here's a candy cane. Now go in the corner and, I don't know, do something constructive with yourselves. And let the rest of the world march on to a better, brighter, more open and friendly future. That's funny coming from a Lovecraftian monster, but that's just me.
Yes, it's very curious to me how many people seem to spend their lives obsessing over other people doing things that they don't like, when we've never had a law that says that two people who enjoy pooing on each other can't marry or anything like that, whereas could be happening next door. There, husband and wife, they might be pooing on each other. I happen not to want to watch it, but those people do exist. And we don't have laws for all sorts of things. It's really quite bizarre. I do find marriage between two green-eyed people disgusting.
Oh, definitely. Actually, in the Church of Cthulhu, those two people are kind of... if you have two people who have two green eyes falling in love, they are kind of put to death almost immediately for trying to dare such a horrible, disgusting thing. I mean, in the name of Cthulhu, not in my name. Not in my name.
What if one of them only has one eye? So it's a one-eyed, green-eyed person with somebody who has two or more eyes.
Well, that's the thing. If two green-eyed people want to marry, both of them has to lose at least one eye. So that's when you see a bunch of one-eyed, green-eyed folk. Two people with both having one eye, and that eye happens to be green, they are most likely worshippers of the old gods. So yes, beware, and no one is safe. Ha 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 ha. Cue lightning.
I think this is the most insightful conversation in the same-sex marriage debate that has ever occurred.
My other thought about the whole thing that you brought up, Alex, was about why people are so interested in what other people are doing that they don't like. Coming from a friend, I'm going to use Quebec and Ontario, the two provinces that hate each other, as an example for this. In Quebec culture, alcohol is sold at dépanneurs, like corner stores. Sexuality, interracial dating, homosexuality, things like that, very open. I could remember being 5 or 6 and knowing that my father's best friend was gay. My father was gay. Being able to ask anything sexual I wanted to ask. And then coming to Ontario, I've noticed that things like alcohol are very marginalized. Things like sex and sexuality are very hush-hush. And here in Ontario, they have a much higher alcoholism rate because of it, because alcohol is taboo, where in Quebec it isn't. And sexuality here in Ontario, you find a higher number of like teen pregnancies and things of that nature because they don't get the education they need. So it could be something of that nature. What's happening is you have one culture that is very much rigid in their, I'm scared of sex, sex is a bad thing, sex is dangerous, sex is only for this way and that way. And then you have the rest of the world who, you know, are actually grown-ups and know that, you know, sex is a beautiful thing and gender and sexuality aren't mutually exclusive.
Indeed, indeed. And Milan, we briefly lost you, but you're back. I just, on one final thing, because we know about England, Wales now, we know about Canada. I don't actually, Australia's quite a conservative, oh, we've lost him again. I was about to ask him if they have same-sex marriage in any of the states of Australia. Oh, there you are.
Hello?
So, yes, sorry. Hello. Does Australia have any, oh, we've lost Milan again. Well, we were fine, folks, before the recording began. Damn it. Well, we'll have to, if I remember to ask Milan when and if we get him back, touch wood, I'll ask him then. Right. Oh dear. What a great start we're getting off to. Actually, it was pretty smooth until another technical thing happened. I'll let the audience know. No edition of this show ever goes completely smoothly, but the same exact thing never goes wrong twice. So this is this week's thing, touch wood. Midnight Goddess, do you have any final closing words on the subject of same-sex marriage?
My final thought on the same-sex marriage, I think what happened in Tennessee, the bill they tried to pass, that they tried to pass in Arkansas, Tennessee, and I believe it was Ohio, where it was, you could actually deny a same-sex couple as like a service because of their sexual orientation. I think that has actually put the civil rights movement, as it were, back almost 50 years in the United States. I think it's a really sad state of affairs when the place that says that they're the ones who govern the world and they should be the example for the world is being so antiquated.
Okay, now that we finally have Mr. Milan back, or sorry, Mr. Jetfic should that be. So, LGBTQ, same-sex marriage, etc. in Australia, how would you paint a picture for us of how that looks at the moment?
Well, it's funny enough because you'd think that, see, essentially Australia is essentially the world's gayest country, and I don't mean that in a I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean, like factually, we are the most homosexual continent on the face of the globe. And the fact that, I mean, it's not like, you know, people get burned for being gay. It's a very open, very kind of, nobody gives a shit. As long as you're wearing a little bit of plastic around it, you know, you can stick it anywhere you want. But I guess it's just, I'm not 100% sure if it's illegal here or not, which is rather weird. I mean, like, they have, like, there's a lot of, gay people here, so I guess it should be, but I know this is really quite embarrassing, but I don't really stay, I don't know if it's legal or not here. I think it is in Sydney.
Oh.
Can I make one comment on that, Milan, before we continue, Alex?
Okay.
Actually, if a country has ever had sodomy laws, they, when they legalize same-sex marriage and all of this, the laws still stay on the books. They never actually get scratched out. So things like sodomy laws still exist, and believe it or not, oral sex between, like, even just a man on a woman is considered sodomy in most of the United States.
Right.
Yes.
Quite bizarre. Milan, when you said you weren't sure if it was legal, I assume you meant same-sex marriage, not homosexuality.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay, so I think we're going to have to, maybe in the next recording break, we'll do some research into Australia or the various states of Australia and see if there's any same-sex marriage. But I do know that they're a little bit prudish when it comes to Australian television, with the exception of Prisoner Cell Block H, which obviously had lesbian characters in it. But I know that shows like Home and Away and Neighbours, they'd get an angry phone call and they'd have to abort their attempt at a same-sex. Whereas it used to be that way. I think maybe Neighbours has had... They have had at least one gay character. I don't know if they've ever actually had a gay relationship, because I haven't seen it in 10 years.
Yeah, me too.
But,
I think...
But yeah.
Go ahead. Neighbours and home. I can never say. I can't speak. God damn it. Home and Away is just a thing, and so is Neighbours. I used to watch it when I was a wee boy, but I think I remember a few gay characters and a few gay subplots, and it's not like, oh, look over there, it's a pink person, let's set him on fire. Nothing like that. It was just like, I think they actually acknowledge that they exist, which is fantastic.
Okie dokie then. Right. Well, on I think then to the next topic, and I ask everybody please to watch read the article, watch the video in the description. This is a young man from here in the UK who's done a video about consent, and some people are saying that this vlog is better than anything taught in classrooms about consent. Now, I can't remember, because me at school, I left school half my lifetime ago, and I can't remember what we were told about consent in the classroom. I don't think our sex education was that great. I think it didn't really go beyond the biological. It was very matter of fact. It was treated as a science class, as far as I can recall. There wasn't really. I don't remember anything about consent or about the emotions involved in sex. I think it was, if you have sex, have safe sex, and the rest was just biology, or anatomy, or whatever. And Midnight Goddess and Rob, your thoughts on what this young man had to say, and if you think that's the best teaching about consent that there is, better than anything in the classroom.
Before I talk about that, Alex, I just found the answer to our question about the recognition of same-sex unions in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so same-sex unions are treated as de facto unions under Australian federal law. Each Australian state or territory is entitled to create their own laws in respect to same-sex relationships and same-sex partner schemes. Same-sex couples, however, have been prevented from marrying due to a ban on same-sex marriage contained within the Federal Marriage Act of 1961, amended in 2004 by the Howard government. So no, they do not actually have same-sex marriage rights in Australia at the moment, although the Human Rights Commission is currently trying to make 85 reforms under the Commonwealth to eliminate the discrimination against same-sex couples.
It's weird because, like, the fact that when I heard that, thank you for saying that. Australia just seems like one of those countries where same-sex marriage would be allowed. I mean, anywhere else, like, the idea that it wasn't here in Australia, it was just preposterous to me. I mean, like I mentioned before, we are literally the most homosexual continent on the face of the earth. I mean, look at our shape, and it's. I mean, I'm joking, but of course, it just seems so weird that still to this day, Australia, the home of the drag queen, does not allow gay marriage. It just seems so weird to me. And yeah, sorry for my incompetence. I know I live here, but even still. My political ignorance.
It's the apathy of people like you. You've got to take the example of the Irish and take to the streets and get the ball rolling and have Australia demand the right to same-sex marriage.
There is that. That has happened, and yes, just so you know, I don't feel like getting married anytime soon. But yeah, I will march if there happens to be one.
As a bisexual man, would the chance of one day, 5 years, 10 years, of marrying somebody of either sex, because you could fall in love, you was likely to fall in love with a man as with a woman, as I. So, marrying a man, having a husband, something that would appeal to you if you had the right?
To me at least. I don't know if I'll marry a man because I want children, and I think you
adopt.
I can adopt, but the thing is, for me, it's a weird thing where I want to. It's about having my child. The fact that my child has my own blood pumping through its veins, it's kind of a reassuring monkey brain thing, but I don't know. I want to say you hold my Russian blood within you, and if it's adopted, Yao Ping, we've got paperwork proving that you belong to us for a bit. But I'm not knocking, gay adoption. I'm just, for me personally, okay. I might get, who knows how the heart goes. Maybe I will, and maybe we will adopt him. Actually, if I were to marry a man, I would artificially inseminate a woman. Get a donor or something, get a donor egg. So at least I can say, at least I have a creature that has my essence pumping through its veins. Well, that's all I want.
Okay, well, I hope you one day find a human to breed with, Milan.
No, you and me both.
Okay, so on to the subject of this young man whose YouTube name I can't remember, but maybe I'll link the article and the channel. So go and sub
Charlie
this guy.
Is so cool like.
Charlie is so cool like. Midnight Goddess, your thoughts on this young man's appraisal or explanation of consent?
Actually, I've downloaded the video to save for when I teach my son about consent. It is one of the best explanations I have seen.
Okay.
I remember sex ed, and I went to a French Catholic school, and they taught the girls to say no, and that we had the right to say no, and that it would be a stranger, and that it would be someone who came up behind us, and things like that. They never taught us that it could be our friend. They never taught us that it could be a family member. They never taught us that it could happen in the middle of the day in your bedroom while you're hanging out. They gave us a very false sense of stranger danger when it came to sexuality.
Right.
And I think that, has done a disservice to a lot of women, because we protect ourselves against people we don't know, when in more cases than not, the person who is assaulted knows her or his rapist.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't surprise me at all that a lot of people, in fact, when we had Genesis on a few weeks ago, who was raised in Texas, basically there was no education to do with consent at all.
Really?
Yeah, but then again, that's Bible Belt, that's another religious thing, so yeah, it doesn't surprise me that religion fails at this. I would say I kind of watched the video thinking, sorry.
I'm sorry, just isn't it state I can't speak. Isn't it state mandated that you got to teach your children this? It's not having to do with religion. It should be just a basic health thing.
Actually, Milan, it's only mandated that they teach about the reproductive cycle, not actually about consent. So they can have a sex ed class, for example, in a Catholic school, where all they teach is how to deal with getting your period. And that's considered sex ed.
So they basically teach you a quarter of the lesson, and the rest, and just are silent about everything else. Yeah,
they teach abstinence, and then they do stranger danger. That's exactly what I had.
Abstinence? What's that?
No, I said that's stranger danger. I was told that, my rapist would be, that person lurking in the shadows, that person, things like that. And then when it actually happened, it turned out to be someone I knew. You know what I mean? So they never taught us that it could be like that. So consent was never, a factor because you were supposed to be married and you didn't deny your husband what he wanted. So we were taught stranger danger. And I think that did a huge disservice.
Yeah. Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh.
I watched this video thinking this isn't rocket science, but understanding the young might need to be told it. The disturbing thing being that a lot of adults need to be taught it, and women as well as men. Rob, sorry.
No, so I was just making noises. Go right ahead.
Rob, you saw the video too. Do you have any comment on the issue?
I think it's one of the best consent videos that I've ever watched, to be honest. It explains the consequences better than anything, right down to the law of what it means if the girl says no, and she says that you raped her by doing it after she says no, you're guaranteed you're going to jail.
And even if she says he or she, and is applicable to men as well, and that's body language. He pointed out body language and things like that as well. That's something a lot of people don't realize. You can say no with your body, and that's still considered rape under the law.
Yeah.
Funny enough, this I didn't find so shocking because in my I know it's kind of weird to say that my public school education, as lapsed and weird and quasi incompetent as it was, I had a really great sex education program, and the teachers essentially said everything that this fellow said, but in more detail. The whole concept of consent was ringed into our skulls over and over again, saying, if she says no, back off. If he says no, back off. That was just what was just ringed in our heads over and over again. And essentially, for the quality of the rest of the school and the lessons, besides that, we have a really great sex education course program in my school. I can't really say that it may be different in other schools. Maybe it was just the coolness of our teachers, but just really great.
So, if nothing else, say what you like about Australia. By the sounds of it, they at least get this one aspect of education right. At least going by this young man's experience of this actual school. So, on with the next topic then. And basically, there's a new epic movie coming up, I suppose a biblical epic, starring none other than Inspector Javert from Les Miserables, although I don't think this... there is a Noah's Ark musical, but I don't think this is it. This is the epic movie where every single animal is CGI or some kind of puppet. There's literally not one actual animal in it, unless you count humans. Well, yes, I suppose we can count Russell Crowe as an animal of sorts. You must be very proud, actually, Milan, of course. Russell Crowe must be the most famous Australian actor.
Well, yes. He is what most people would consider a chimera. He is technically an animal. He has the heart of a lion, the beard of a gorilla, and the muscles of a thing that is strong. Russell Crowe, the hero of Australia. And he's also Superman's dad, which is cool.
And part Aborigine as well, I believe.
I think so. Every quasi-white Australian here has some sort of Aboriginal blood in them. Even the whitest of white men with blonde hair and blue eyes has at least a pint, or at least quarter of a pint of Aboriginal blood in them. Which, yeah.
Well, this Noah's Ark film, it seems, Fox News at least, raised some sort of concern, and apparently there's been some fuss that this film depicting the Great Flood and Noah's Ark may be not entirely accurate.
Go ahead.
To put it another way, this fiction may not quite match that other fiction. And if you actually play the video, apparently, I don't know how, but apparently this film, although based on a story from Genesis, does actually allude to evolution in some way. They're not adhering to a literal creation story. Now, I think they can do what they want. It's an epic movie based on what I guess, actually, if you think about it, is a pretty epic story. Worldwide flood, massive boat with every species of animal on it, Russell Crowe as Noah, come on now. And I can understand why a lot of biblical literalist, young earth creationists were all excited to see a movie based on a part of Genesis, and then they found out, oh, wait, these people don't agree. It's not made by people who agree with our nutjob fundy ideas. They just want to tell this story as a movie and do what they want with it with a load of CGI animals. And maybe that evolution thing is true. So I think I might actually rather enjoy this. It's based on a bullshit story, but then a lot of the best films are based on stories that are completely made up. Or at least, in this instance, sort of based on some kind of myth or legend, sort of based on something in a passed down to word of mouth kind of way that ended up being what I believe is a sort of Semitic poem that at some point people decided was actually true. Midnight Goddess, of course, you come from quite a religious upbringing, but I don't think you're a believer anymore, are you? I don't know how literalist you were raised to be. It's not surprising these people are complaining, but what's your opinion on a Noah's Ark movie that isn't slavish or kowtowing to the creatards?
Well, I was raised fundamentalist Lutheran. So, to say that it was a religious upbringing is an understatement. So, no, I do not follow that at all anymore. But even my mother is actually quite upset about this. And she's still very devout. Her problem with this is that they're making a mockery, is how she puts it, is they're making a mockery out of her faith and what she believes to be true and what was divinely decided upon before any of us came into being. And I personally think that, I disagree with her. I think that, if anything, people should have been more up in arms about Passion of the Christ than Noah's Ark movie. I mean, even if you are most fundamentalist, how could you even even think that this would happen? That it wasn't started out oh, I caught a small fish, and then by the time 10 years later you're telling the story, you caught a shark. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's something that I would imagine myself telling my son as a bedtime story, not as something that I would take as factual, anything factual at all, even as someone who does believe in a form of spirituality. I wouldn't take it at face value. One, because the earth itself has no physical records, the sediment, or there's no evidence that a flood like that took place. Secondly, there's no way with the dimensions of the boat that it could have ever happened. And there's been no archaeological evidence. You'd think something that massive would leave some type of archaeological evidence. And the only archaeological evidence that they did claim to find about Noah's Ark was debunked 10 years after it was found, because it was deemed to be fraudulent by the person who had done the dating on it. So I think it's just another excuse for the fundies to get mad about something. It's this is the tantrum of the week.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry. I'm sorry. Go right ahead. I'll save my piece afterwards.
Hearing what you said about the point about stories that change and evolve and become exaggerated and things, I would say, in the UK we have lots of folklore where you could say that King Arthur was sort of based on this character or that character, originally 5th century, updated to be pro-Crusades propaganda for the 15th, which is why you get all the armor plating and things. And some people think King Arthur was real, which in a sense, I mean, it was based on real people to an extent. Real is tricky with history, and of course we have Robin Hood. If you actually go to Nottingham, where obviously there's lots of Robin Hood tourism, there's a tree that dates back to the time of the Robin Hood myth, legend, whatever you call it, and become sort of known as Robin Hood's tree, as if you imagine that Robin Hood and his merry men might have camped out by that tree. And there's even some myth that if newlyweds have sex under that tree, they will definitely conceive. And so the Nottingham Council has to spend millions a year on security to stop people having sex underneath that particular tree. So you get these pilgrimages of people who believe this nonsense about a tree that happens to be old and a story that never really happened but something a bit like it might have, and it becomes real. But the point of the matter is, you can do what you want with your own King Arthur or Robert Holmes movie, TV show. They've been reinvented, they will be reinvented, and people need to get a grip, and even if they believe in a god, acknowledge that this is no different from thinking King Arthur and Robin Hood were real. And Milan, your point.
Funny thing enough, like I understand, I don't really understand why these, fundamentalists are getting mad at this movie. Because funny enough, I think it's just the Reformed churches. Because what I find most interesting and fascinating about this film, it's by Darren Aronofsky, one of my favorite of directors, and it just has a lot of great talent behind it. But mainly because it takes the actual mythological parts of the Bible, the stuff that the church likes to sweep under the rug, the whole Nephilim and angels coming down pre the flood and essentially having sex with all the women and breeding these half man, half angel monstrosities, and just like some actual genuine mythicness that is in the Bible that some sects of Christianity choose to say that are just, oh, that's just metaphor, or you shouldn't pay attention to that. We just, let's just focus on the New Testament stuff. Because if you read the Old Testament, it's filled with these epic myths of, God and devils and giants and monsters and just like any other, old world pantheon or old world mythology. It has its rather amazing fanciful elements, and I think it's let's see, back in the golden age of Hollywood, people think that Hollywood made all those old-timey great biblical movies because it was overly religious. Not so. Hollywood has always been a den of debauchery, essentially. And the reason they made so many biblical films was because during the Hays Code wouldn't go down so hard in them, depicting violence and or sex in their movies, because they could just say, oh, I'm just sticking to scripture, Samson smashing in the head of another biblical character is just skipping the scripture. And really, Hollywood likes to make, large epics. There was a time in Hollywood where the biblical epic was an actual epic. I mean, the Charlton Heston movie, like it if you're not, but you gotta say, in scope and in vision, it's a grand, large, amazing story, whether it's you have to be religious or not, because obviously it's the movies.
Are you referring to Ben-Hur?
Not Ben-Hur, but the Ten Commandments. That's what.
Okay, that's why I wanted to know which one you were referring to, because they're both biblical epics. So.
Oh yeah,
sorry.
Of course, like biblical epics. It was a genre, but I guess over time, as somewhere in the 80s, around that time, where the government started cozying up to the more fundamentalist sects, more the more desaturated bits of Christianity, the Christian epic kind of went into the hands of these propagandist hacks. And when you say Christian movie or Bible movie, it's no longer these epic high budget almost not historical epics, but these large mythic opuses. Instead, when you say Bible movie, what jumps to mind is Fireproof, Kirk Cameron and all that benign filth. You know, but Aronofsky is really from what he's doing, what he's trying to do is essentially recapture all that old Hollywood zeal by taking a large mythic story and essentially telling it on a large, telling it like it should be told, large, huge, and incredible in scope. And I love the fact that he's actually taking old stuff from the Bible. And the fact that, maybe the evolution is real, this is what I've heard of it. I haven't seen the film myself, but I've gotten a bit of I've heard some reviews, but from people who have. Essentially, this movie starts out with, Noah narrating, the creation story. And as, he's narrating the actual, story, there's this, amazing light show, like from Cosmos, and we're kind of meant to believe that, yes, the creation story is kind of a metaphor for all these naturally occurring things that we know in science, like Big Bang, formation of stars, yada yada. But when Adam and Eve turn up, things kind of go different. Instead, like evolution still exists, but Adam and Eve are apparently like these glowing, semi-divine beings, and the snake is there, and it's just kind of incorporates this mythic. More, creationist, not creationist, because creationism in general is just ridiculous. But the creation myth, it kind of blends it weirdly with, the story of, with actual, with the Big Bang and evolution and whatever. And after that point, it takes the large mythic parts of like Nephilim and the angel mythologies and all that stuff, and kind of brings that stuff back that, if you read the original Noah story from the Old Testament, the main reason why God didn't, flooded the earth wasn't just because people were a bunch of sinners. Mainly it was because a bunch of angels had sex with the daughters of man, as it were, and bred these horrible, giants, they're called Nephilim, the half human, half angels. And they were just kind of running amok, and people started worshiping other gods and whatever. And so Noah was essentially tasked to save all the innocent animals, and it's large and epic. Anyway, it's a mythic story that Hollywood wants to tell, and I don't really understand why the fundamentalists are really angry about it. I mean, just because Hollywood, maybe because it's the project is headed by a well-known director who is secular in nature, and I don't. Maybe it's that, but I don't see. Maybe they're going back to the Old Testament and using things that are in the Bible, and maybe that kind of that goes against their particular sect. But I mean, it's gonna be a giant epic. I'm more worried about I'm almost 100% sure this is going to be one amazing movie, but I'm more worried about on both. It's a double-edged sword now, because you have kind of those reflective, angry atheists hearing that this is a Noah movie, a Bible movie, and instantly kind of write it off as like I'm a sophisticated intellectual man. I not go see a movie that supports creationism. It doesn't. It's a mythic story. In that case, why don't go see The Lord of the Rings, because it has dragons in it. It's a fantasy.
Exactly.
And so you got both sides. You got the risk, the movie has a risk of offending those, high, intellectual atheists too high above to go see anything to do with the Bible. And on the other side, on the other opposite, you got the fundamentalists who are saying, this story doesn't exactly fit with my interpretation of Scripture. They're making a mockery of my faith. And it's like, you didn't really, that wasn't really an issue when, Charlton Heston was, preaching the Ten Commandments and this and Ben-Hur and all these other great biblical epics. You didn't have a problem with that, but I guess it's just, it's since this is a modern retelling, and I don't know. I think they're gonna play a little bit with the whole environmentalism theme, because this from what the trailers, it looks like a what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like a Stone Age post-apocalypse. And they're gonna it's not gonna be like. I guess it's gonna have a bit of a disaster movie feel to it, but kind of in that more, yeah. In that
the day after tomorrow, done Bronze Age style.
Exactly, but but good, and and actually I think they're gonna do a lot more, play around, like I mentioned before, a lot more with the whole angel mythology. But it's gonna be good. I really think that, if you're an atheist, give it a chance, because it's Aronofsky. That man knows how to direct with class. And for all those Christians out there, sure, give it a chance. Just give it a chance, see what you think. It's going to be a grand old epic, whether you're religious or not. So
I definitely agree about the Nephilim. I want to see Azazel and the 200 Nephilim. I think that's fantastic.
I mean,
never get enough of that.
That's the thing. I don't understand. You read the Bible, like, there's been so many, like, biblical, quote-unquote, apocalypse movies, like the ridiculous Left Behind series that is just, oh my God. I mean, like, if you read the Bible, the descriptions of angels, these gigantic things that have a head of a lion, head of a goat, head of an eagle, head of an angel, head of a man, that, with like 16 wings, a giant fiery sword with eyes all over it, fighting these, insane, monstrous, indescribable demons, the legions of hell falling from the ground into the sky, and the hosts of heaven falling down to meet them. I mean, you read the descriptions in the Bible, of the apocalypse, and it's fucking trippy. I mean, you have such great story ore to draw from visually. I mean, this is my own, artists, wannabe director coming out, and we have the technology to do this, and yet you want to put like white men in shitty armor with paper wings. I want a giant lion-headed angel with a fiery sword cutting the head of a giant multi-armed centipede monster demon thing. I want to see a proper apocalypse movie that's biblically accurate and insane.
I would love to see a big budget Book of Revelations. I completely agree. And Kat and Rob, anything to add?
Sorry about that. What I was my comment is, Milan, you were mentioning when someone thinks of the Noah's Ark story, they think of that, the happy, bubbly, color book version of it. In the faith that I was raised in, which is Lutheran, the story that we learned was, the actual biblical story. They try and scare the heck out of you in that faith because they just want you to make sure that you're never going to do anything wrong. So it's the stories that I learned were much different than I think a lot of of the other faiths, like if in Christianity and things like that, where mine were, I was terrified anytime I went to Bible school or camp or anything, because we learned what you're referring to, the half human, half angels, and how they were an abomination and God was going to kill us, and we were all at risk of becoming these abominations because they were the people who tried to bring you into sex before marriage, and that's how they stole your soul, and it's really kind of a messed up faith. So I am kind of interested in seeing it now, and as an adult who doesn't have the fear of that I had as a child of these creatures, and fear of waking up one day and giving birth to a 9-headed baby. And it's I kind of look at it from that point, from the point where now I can stand back from the fear that they tried to instill in us, and that I think it'll be really interesting to see kind of what they do with it, because again, that director is pretty phenomenal, and so yeah, that's kind of just what I wanted to add to what Milan was saying.
Yeah. That's really great, and that's what I mean.
I think one point. Sorry.
Good.
One point I'd like to address is where you say about how the So yes, I did read this, that the director is an atheist. The same is true of a 1960s Italian film, The Gospel According to St. Matthew. It was actually made by not only an atheist, but a filthy communist, goddammit. Mm-hmm. And it was meant to be a kind of Marxist film, but it's actually a very slavish adaptation of the Book of Matthew, which a lot of Christian film buffs prefer to the big Hollywood epics. Despite it's black and white, it's low budget, it's quite long, it's got subtitles. And it's actually got the honour of being Vatican approved. And that was made by an atheist communist using Matthew to try and promote Marxist thinking, but yet somehow embraced. So I don't think the beliefs of the person making it should have any bearings at all, really.
I think the Catholics will freaking love this film. I really do think so. Because it seems to retain some of that stuff in it. I'm not saying that's the thing. This whole idea. I'm once again going to focus on the hoity-toity atheists. I am an atheist myself, hardcore, whatever. But it's a movie about a man who builds a fucking boat to save animals from monsters and a crazy man in the sky that will flood the world. It's a giant epic fantasy. Enjoy yourselves. And I don't mean in an ironic hipster way, oh my god, this is ridiculous. I mean, you don't watch other amazing fantasy films like The Lord of the Rings, like I mentioned before, and say, oh my god, hobbits totally don't exist. I'm so smart that I know hobbits don't exist. I mean, just for fuck's sake. And the fact these atheists think, that this movie by Darren goddamn Aronofsky is going to promote creationism. I mean, for God's sake, man. Where you have a movie that, has giant, scary, angel, stone monster things in it. I mean, I'm sure the religious right, the ones that like it, will use it as a tool to try to convert folk, but they'll use anything. I mean, I guarantee you, all these, some, not all of them, but eventually some of these naysayers who happen to be religious will go see the movie, like it, and use it as hey kids, watch this epic Noah story. That's so real. Come, worship God, or God will do that again. It's gonna be a great movie. I'm gonna go into it, watch it like anything else, and hopefully be blown away by the cinematography, storytelling, and epic themes.
Okay, so there's been an article this week about Gwyneth Paltrow. Basically, rather than having a breakup, which could be very emotionally destructive and depressing, there's something called conscious uncoupling, which is better than unconscious coupling. But is this just a fad for the famous, or is this something mentally healthy that will take off? And rather than explain it, of course, the article is in the description. Midnight Goddess has some knowledge of this, so I'll defer to you, Midnight.
Okay, so just to give the people an understanding of what conscious uncoupling is, instead of the messy breakup, you can go into a therapy program, which usually runs from 6 to 8 weeks, 2 sessions a week, typically, and it teaches you how to separate yourself emotionally, physically, mentally, and financially from your partner. And that way you're supposed to be able to part on amicable terms. Now, the reason that I personally do not prescribe to this type of thing is because, one, I kind of think of it a bit of like a Band-Aid, when you should rip a Band-Aid off really, really quickly instead of just picking at it. Because sometimes the breakup is you're breaking up usually for a reason. There's a reason people should not be cohabitating or as a couple, and in these particular types of situations, they encourage the continued cohabitation, although separate bedrooms, obviously. That way you can separate your things and things of that nature. But what if some of the underlying things are abuse and people aren't going to talk about it? you're just putting them back into that situation. And it already is statistically proven that it takes up to 7 times for someone leaving and coming back to leave permanently an abusive situation. So if you've got someone who, in a situation, we'll use the Gwyneth Paltrow situation. I'm not saying there is abuse in their relationship. I'm saying if there were mental, financial, physical, etc., you're just giving that person an opportunity not only to clench in deeper, but to do something more drastic. And, you know, that's why conscious uncoupling is not really something that is done in Canada anymore, because there were deaths related to it, because there were situations where people would talk their mates who had left and gone to shelters for battered men and women, and they would get their partner back saying this was a therapy technique so they could separate, be better for the kids, etc., and there were deaths. So this is something that's not really practiced in Canada anymore for that reason.
Wow, I'd never heard of this before, the Gwyneth Paltrow thing. So this is something that's been tried and okay, not quite as good as perhaps the article made it sound. Milan, your thoughts?
I just find this whole idea to be essentially teaching people how to be sociopaths. You know, I mean, it's the whole idea. From what it seems, it's just like I mentioned before. Midnight Goddess brought up the idea of just tearing away a Band-Aid instead of just prolonging the process. I mean, it just seems so incredibly ridiculous. Why would you do this? It's goodness. I'm sorry. My brain has gone blank. I had this really great thing. I mean, you're essentially. I think it's just essentially trying to deny people their. Why would you want to break up in the first place? It's going to be obviously. This whole thing is meant to make people not feel as much, devastating emotion regarding the breakup. But, I mean, why would you do that? Like, I'm sorry, oh my God. It doesn't make any sense. When you're trying to break up, why would you, I don't know. Fucking hell, I'm sorry, mate.
Well, people want an amicable breakup because you look back on your life and you think of, well, I have most of my ex-partners on my Facebook, so I'm on good terms with most of them eventually, but there's generally a period that isn't so amicable, and some people you never see them again, and sometimes there's regrets, or there's guilt, or there's anger, or there's always unsaid things, and there's unsaid things as well. Some people cope with closure better than others. So I can see people going for this option. The reason I thought that this was just some Hollywood fad at first is that they're a famous couple. It's I can't remember, the lead singer of Coldplay was Gwyneth Paltrow's husband. Or no, sorry, I think they are still legally married. And I guess they're under a lot of pressure because they're both famous. So they are a celebrity couple whether they like it or not, but they're very private people and would rather... And they've got, famous people, whenever we think of them, they have those extra kinds of pressures. And you've got two creative people living together as well, so there could be a lot more passion, the artistic temperament, Yeah,
of course.
So, no, I can understand why people would think this is a good idea, and I've heard some good things. But if, deaths related to it, you'd think people would look up enough to know that and think, maybe not such a good idea.
I mean, yes, whenever there's a breakup involved, it's always, the idea of, there's always going to be a really high voltage emotion to it. And I understand the need and the want people have to just try to distance themselves from that devastating, soul-crushing emotional trauma that a breakup would cause. I understand that, but really, you can't just, you can't just, it's like putting the problem sweeping it under the carpet. if the relationship isn't working, if it's abusive, like Midnight Goddess said, then yes, you should break up. But the thing is, even if you're people who, yes, hate each other or just aren't going well together, maybe, it's not working out, trying to prolong it, trying to, separate your stuff. It's essentially, we're not going to sleep in the same bed anymore, but we're still together. It reminds me of that, those really sanitary 1960s, cartoons and movies and sitcoms where like the mom and pa had separate beds, and for some reason that's so depressing. I mean, your love life, your marriage, your relationship has gotten to such a point that you can't even bear laying next to each other in a big old bed.
Well, I think the important thing is to have a gradual transition.
Exactly.
It also occurs, as you said, mum and pa. When there are children, what's easier on the children? Suddenly they go from living with both of you to only living with one of you and maybe seeing the other at the weekends.
I know, but...
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. I grew up in that relationship, and my little sister is growing up in that now. I mean, my mom and my dad tried to make it work. At least my mom did. My father had a large gambling problem, and they tried to, they were together. They loved each other. When we first came to Australia, my father, we just escaped, Bosnia, and I was born in Moscow, and my dad, kind of that whole thing. My dad used to be a big shot, and with the war, he kind of lost everything and became a nobody, living in a little apartment in Russia with a legion of other family members. And when he came to Australia, I guess he just kind of got a gambling problem, and that's, they tried to stay together, but I had to live with that as a child, seeing mommy and daddy grow to hate and loathe each other, and knowing that it's not like if the relationship has become so toxic, your children notice it. They know they see when mommy and daddy hate each other and start having these vicious stabs at each other, and just the love is gone, the caringness is gone, and it fucks up the kids. So it's better for both the kids. Sure, the whole seeing your dad on the weekend or your mom on the weekend, it's bad, but at least you're not living in an environment where mommy and daddy fucking hate each other. My little sister is living in that environment right now.
Right.
Yeah, and that whole everything can't. With me, it all ended in blows and just domestic violence while me and my little brother watched. It wasn't pretty because they were trying to essentially board up the holes in a sinking ship instead of doing the intelligent thing, putting life jackets on everybody, trying to jump out and swim to the shore. Instead, they were trying to plug up the holes, and the ship sank, and there were sharks in the water.
And I have to kind of agree with Milan on that. My parents stayed married for 35 years, and my father is and has always been and has always known that he is a homosexual man. And living in that environment, I always knew my father was gay, and I knew their marriage was a complete farce. So growing up in that environment, it was almost like they stayed married because they felt they had to based on their faith. And it's not like they were physically abusive or yelled at each other, but they avoided each other constantly. They never hugged, they never kissed, they never showed emotion, they never said I love you, things like that. So it was like living in a sanitary 1960s sitcom. And only once my parents divorced did they actually become friends and like each other now. They actually talk. They never used to do that.
See, my parents separated when I was so young that I can't remember. So I'm lucky in a sense, because I grew up, it was just normal. It was the way it was. It was, I do know actually a friend of mine who's originally American, moved to the UK, married an Englishman. I knew both of them. And they actually did say, I don't know if they were trying to do conscious uncoupling, but when there was a limited period before she moved out, when they were living together but separately and in separate beds and as friends. And they said that they'd never been happier, that their friendship and just being roomies actually worked better than their marriage did. But I guess maybe it's just something that works for some people and not others. But did you have anything to add, Milan?
This whole idea of people, forced, to stay with each other by their religious beliefs, because that tends to be a large factor in most of these cases. Instead of just getting a divorce and sometimes becoming friends afterwards, sometimes just leaving each other alone, depending on the situation. Some people, most the religious people are kind of forced by their faith in their church culture to stay with each other, where it would be healthier to separate. And it's, like I mentioned before, my mom and stepdad are living in that kind of sleep in different beds relationship. And it's like, my mom, I tell her, whenever they have a fight, or my stepfather leaves from Moscow or whatever, my mom is happy, genuinely happy. And when he comes back, it's always, I ask her, just throw him the fuck out. And she always uses religion to justify it, saying, it's, we have to pray, we have to love. She brings up this idea that I find just completely and horrifyingly grotesque. It is easy to stay with someone you love. It is hard and Satanry to stay with someone you don't. And ideally, you have to force yourself to live with someone who you hate and who hates you back. This is not good psychologically for you, him, or Masha. And this idea that religion kind of poisons people's minds, and not in just I hate to say that in that way, but regarding relationships, there are sometimes religious families are wonderful. I've known Mormons and other religious families that are just the happiest, and faith is a great thing that helps along with that. But sometimes faith for some people just makes everything worse.
And on with a special topic, because this week our newcomer MilanJeftic has Jeftic. I always say it wrong. Has something to say on the subject of homophobia.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, genders, sexualities, and preferences, I, as my dear friend Alex Wiley has previously just now said, yes, I am MilanJeftic, and I have something to say about homophobia. And I'm sure most of you out there will agree that homophobia is a bad thing that exists. But I think, personally, that it is a natural... It's natural. It's not all... homophobia as a thing, I don't think only stems from religious hatred or ignorance. I think it's a biological defense mechanism. You see, back in man's early days, essentially... you were lucky if you lived past 40, but that's neither here nor there. Humanity evolved to fuck and breed, and to pass on its genes and what have you. And what is a gay man, or a lesbian woman, to the mind of a heterosexual? Genetic dead end. I know, a gay man can still have sex with a woman and have a child, but he's gay. And the idea, I think the idea of homosexuality offends the animal brain, because we as humans are genetically, well, not engineered, but have evolved to reproduce at all costs, and make sure that the species doesn't drop below extinction level. Even though now the planet is, well, there's too many bloody people on it, and people keep on fucking, right? Essentially, the animal brain doesn't realize that. All it knows is that I got to spread my seed as far and wide as I possibly can because I don't want the species to die out. And instead of we'll just be too many people on the planet Earth. The thing is, what I think is homophobia is a natural response to this fear of the death of the species. Because, you see, I always find it fascinating when a mother or a father or just parents in general kind of turn against their children so quickly when they find out that person is gay. I mean, it's like as though there's a switch being turned in their brain. All of a sudden that, boy or girl that you raised from the very beginning, fed, clean, clothed, educated, loved with all your heart, all of a sudden, when you find out that that boy or girl happens to be a homosexual, and thus the likelihood of grandchildren is, well, little to none, at least to the more ignorant of folk, there's something happens. They all of a sudden turn on their kids, people who they love, so quickly and so suddenly that I think it can't be all just the fear mongering of vile priests or whatever, or propaganda or something like that, or just simple ignorance. I think there's some sort of subconscious reaction to the idea of gay people, and you only really see it from I'm not to say there's no homophobes in large cities, but really homophobia has to do with your living conditions. And, if you happen to be living in a place that is essentially quite ignorant, or a place, a lower income type of place with not exactly a great education, then the likelihood that you are homophobic is quite high. While if you happen to live in a more a city-like area and have a higher education, or above average type of education and exposure to the world, you being homophobic is rather low. And I think it has to do with people getting over that instinct to hate gay people. Once you explain to a mother or a father, get past that animal urge to hate the gay thing that will not breed and give you grandchildren, that will not pass on the genes. Once you get past that very basic, very animal fear, homophobia kind of fades away from the mind of the parent, and they once again see you as, well, their daughter or son. But I think, and it's fascinating how, these basic hatreds, this fear of the other, this fear of homophobia, that's essentially the fear of extinction, how most, dictators or, religious or fascistic or, dictatorial regimes kind of use these basic hatreds to their own advantage to mobilize the populace against this seemingly unknown or invincible enemy that is in our midst. Hitler did it with the Jews, gays and gypsies, as Putin is doing now with the gays and atheists in Russia. And I'm not saying there's going to be, death camps, heavens forbid, like, I hope there isn't. But Russia's homophobia rating was somewhere in the mid-40s. Nobody really gave a shit. I mean, this is the same country that only years previously gave us the amazing lesbian pop group Tattoo. Two hot girls kissing, but lesbianism as a fetish has always been more accepted than gay man on man face kissing. But at least it was like, these are cute girls that like to kiss and sing about how they love each other. And only years after that, the living conditions in Russia began to decline or not get worse, or just Moscow got better, but only Moscow, and shit was still crappy. And and the church started going back into vogue. It was starting to get started to push for traditional values, and the church saw its way, and so they the church and Putin kind of mobilized the people against this terrible enemy, the fag, the foreigner, and the atheist. And all of a sudden, the ratings for homophobia shot up from the mid to upper 40s to the 70s in over a few months, years, by the smear campaign on gay people, saying that equating them to pedophiles and stuff like that, which is fucking retarded. And it's just fascinating to see how lower incomes and living conditions kind of how this type of basic human flaw can be used by the right people to essentially bring people together in some twisted, fucked up way. And I'm just kind of sad. I feel ashamed. I guess this is just how Americans must have felt in the early 2000s. They kind of, oh, you're American? Okay. I feel like previously I could say, I'm a Russian man. I have pride in my motherland. Now I feel only shame. And it's kind of disgustingly hypocritical of the church saying that how the communists, burnt them out from the country and kind of killed them and shot them, and essentially, put their boot to the throats of, Russian Orthodoxy, now come back and do exactly the same thing without a hint of irony to the throats of all gays, atheists, and or foreigners. We were shit upon by the government back then, thus it justifies us being cunts now. It's just... And I know Putin isn't homophobic. He's far too smart for that. He's a brilliant tactician. But instead... And it's ridiculous. One more thing. This whole thing with, Ukraine... It's just a giant intercontinental dick-waving contest. Russia doesn't really give a fuck about that. It just wants to be feared again. If you can't get the rest of the world to respect you, you might as well get them to fear you.
Yeah.
And my greatest fear is that there's going to be another Iron Curtain. Because people of my generation, and even, I'm generation, Y and X in Russia, it was kind of, like, I live in Australia, but, like, I speak to a lot of people from Moscow. Those people are kind of apolitical. They don't really have any real kind of genuine, loyalty to the government. It's just like, I live here. I might as well go to the military and learn a trade. And they have the internet. They have the access to the internet and the World Wide Web, and they know the rest of the world exists. And just to cut them away from that, just say, nope, we're gonna isolate Russia again for another few decades. If that were to happen, I think it would just be a horrible regression. And that's my greatest fear, but I don't know. People say, there's going to be nuclear war, and I'm like, no.
We're kind of back to a Cold War situation without the communism, although Putin's behavior is more Hitler-like. It's more like it's the new Nazi Germany. That's Lebensraum is what the invasion of Ukraine makes me think of. And yes, as you already compared the persecution of the gays or the persecution of observers, well, the scapegoating.
Exactly.
What you've inspired me to think now, actually, in the last 10 minutes, is since James Bond originally came about from the Cold War, and since then James Bond has to be reinvented, James Bond needs to be reinvented again as an outwardly gay man who goes and kicks some bigoted asshole over in Russia.
Well, that's the thing. It'd be fascinating to have if you want to have that would be interesting, but I think it would be kind of gimmicky. But personally, I mean, they have literal fucking skinheads on daytime television now. It's literal fucking skinheads. You should they have fucking videos on YouTube of these fucking Russian skinheads Russian skinheads are terrifying because they actually have military training. They're not the goofballs of the Americans. These are military trained young men that attack in packs and essentially kill to beat half to death foreigners, people who they proclaim to be gay, and now a fucking convicted fucking skinhead who was put into prison for inciting racial violence is now on a fucking daytime talk show. He's a regular guest.
Wow.
And it's just like this flatter, like, I know, like I mentioned before, the whole apolitical nature of Russia's younger generations, but for fuck's sake, Nazism? I mean, it's not the fact that, like, if they, racism, sexism, homophobia, over nationalism, that's bad enough. But why make your own symbol of hate? Why do you have to take the symbol of, that essentially bombed the fuck out of your country? And the scariest thing is, I showed one of these fucking rallies to my stepfather, and he goes, "Oh, see, those boys are doing good work. They're getting rid of all the fucking immigrants." And I'm like, "They're fucking skinheads. They're Nazis." And he's like, "Oh, that's just youthful exuberance." And I'm like, "Are you fucking serious?"
He said youthful exuberance. Skinheads.
Yeah, apparently skinheads are, that's just fascism is just youthful exuberance.
Yes, everybody goes through a Nazi phase. It's part of growing up.
Wow, I guess I skipped mine.
But that's the thing. I mean, like, it's bad enough fucking Nazis. I mean, make your own hate group. I don't, make your own hate group. Don't take the ones.
Fascist groups are never any good at originality.
Exactly.
They make everything.
This might be a little bit funny, but it's It's on kind of the topic of skinheads. There's actually now 60 recognized white power groups in Canada.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, shit.
60? How much is there in America?
500.
There we go.
Whoa.
See, that's not too bad. You only got 60 buffoons. Just 60
groups.
60 groups of idiots. That's fine. America's got like 1,000.
Yeah, but this is Canada. You know what I mean? Like, it's...
Yeah.
Even... It shocks me that we're even taking a step backwards, because 5 or 6 years ago, there was 4.
Fucking hell. And without further ado, our final segment for the evening, that's a good start. The archaeological find that Judas Iscariot of biblical infamy was, and I swear, the more you hear about the guy, apparently a pothead, a pipe found in his tomb. And is it possible that Judas's action, though I say such a hideous word as Judas again, were down to, did a block of hashish cost 30 pieces of silver? Does that explain everything? I would like to point out that in that part of the world at that time period, they might have smoked dried. They might have smoked dung. Was Judas in fact full of shit? We don't know. But first of all, Midnight Goddess, your opinion of Judas Iscariot being a downright druggie.
A downright druggie. Well, it would explain a few things. Kind of like, dude, like, you had to, like, totally see this. We were, like, there with, like, this Jesus guy, and he fed, like, everybody, and he only had, like, these 2 fish and 5 pieces of bread. It was mad. Like, I can totally see that happening. Like, I want to smoke whatever the hell they were smoking in the Bible,
You think that's absolutely every...
like, it's like they're doing everything they can to completely villainize this particular person. When you actually read the mythos that kind of surrounds Judas Iscariot the person, he isn't what the Bible is depicting him to be, if that makes any sense. And What's to say they weren't all...
I think...
Well, what's to say they weren't all high, because they didn't know much about things like herbology and things like that. And there's plants and fruit and things that can give you hallucinations. There's certain types of grains when you're cooking things from scratch that they linked to the Salem witch trials, which were giving people hallucinations where they believed that could have been part of why people thought others were witches because of this particular grain. So how do we know this didn't happen with, the quote-unquote apostles and all of that? And was he really, what if he just wanted his next fix,
Mm-hmm.
And Rob, who's sitting here with me, you got anything to say about Judas Iscariot being a pothead?
First of all, there's no such thing as a pothead. As far as I'm concerned, anyone that smokes marijuana is a florist. Because marijuana is a flower. It grows wild in the woods. Therefore, how can something that grows naturally, produced by somebody that everybody claims is God and puts everything on the earth for a reason...
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how can it be? How can it be legal if it grows naturally in the woods?
The Bible actually says the plants and animals are there for the use of man.
Exactly.
You said it together.
That was perfect unison, and we're getting a bit of echo from MidnyteGoddess.
Sorry, but I can't mute myself while I'm talking.
Okay. I was just going to say, what if the whole Bible was only ever intended to be a drugs diary?
That is...
Yeah, I can see it right now.
Oh my gosh, that'd be kind of cool.
It's basically... Oh, yeah, too. It's just a bunch of all these, nomad fucking tribesmen getting loaded and going, fuck that, man. Like at the end of the world, right, the fucking ground would open up, and these fucking big locusts with the human faces and little crowns will jump out and eat fucking people. And there'll be like this man with a sword, and he's shut the fuck up, Peter, shut the fuck up. This is this little guy with the skull face with a sword coming out of his mouth, and he'll have candles in all of his hands. Okay, he's like 17 hands or whatever, right? I'm serious. That's what gonna fucking happen, man.
Mm-hmm.
Shit. I just say imagine they're just dictating bullshit that they're pulling out of their asses just for a fucking laugh.
I've got to say, actually, the Bible does include talking animals, and once, because I was high continuously for about 3 or 4 years of my adult life. And when I knew it was time to at least cut down was when I was in the kitchen and the cat was at her bowl looking up at me, and I was holding the packet of cat food. And I said, "Do you want some food?" And she looked up at me and went, "Yeah, yeah." And what's weird is...
it was at that point you shit your pants, literally.
It felt right, because the way she said, it was so bossy and impatient that it suited her personality so much that if Nissa the cat spoke, that is exactly the voice she would have.
Oh my, I could picture Nissa doing that. It's just, I could vividly picture that. Rob wanted to jump in.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, folks, let's clear up some of these myths on marijuana as I sit here and roll one. First of all,
it's legal in Canada, by the way, for anybody who wants to flag this video because he mentioned that. It's completely legal. I am a card-carrying person for marijuana.
Hurrah!
Yeah.
First of all, marijuana, as far as I know, and I've been smoking for... Now, this is my personal belief on marijuana. Nobody has to agree with me, and it's always open for discussion. Marijuana, I've never known to cause a death, Everybody says marijuana is a gateway drug. What's it a gateway to? My refrigerator? Because I can show you my grocery bill.
Uh-huh.
You know? Everybody says that marijuana will kill somebody. No, it don't. They say it kills brain cells. Show me where. Because I can show you 100 different studies that prove otherwise.
Uh-huh.
You know, they say that the smoke in it's poisonous. How can it be poisonous? It's used to cure cancer.
He's got a point there. They did give me medicinal marijuana when I was going through chemotherapy.
It's one of the drugs they give you to help you eat when you're depressed. Even though it's a depressant, it stimulates your appetite.
So he just wanted to clear up some myths about marijuana.
Absolutely. And indeed, I don't think it kills people.
Basically, all we gotta do.
Yeah.
I know how to cure all this model. What's it called again? It's when skinny girls start throwing up.
Bulimia.
Bulimia. We cure bulimia by making skinny models. Force feed them pot. Just sit down and fucking smoke it, and then you will eat.
Yeah, you just make them some brownies or a cookie or something, and they take 2 bites. They're stoned. They got the munchies. They'll eat the rest of them.
Society would have a healthier idea of body image if all models got stoned. That's very true.
Well, if we're going to go talk about that, Marilyn Monroe, by today's standards, would be a size 14. That's the average size of a woman. Average dress size. The average dress size of a model is a 0. We got a little off topic about Judas Iscariot, but realistically, if we're talking about eating and things like that, people used to go after the bigger women because it was a sign that they could carry children. It was a sign that they could survive harsh winters, things like that. And
women should be curved. Yes, that is natural.
Women should have curves. I'm sorry. I don't want my woman to look like a boy if I want to fuck a woman. If I want to fuck a man, I'm going to fuck a man. But I don't want my girl to look like a boy. I want my girl to look like a girl. I want her to have the curves. I want her to have the fun parts. Wear the boobs if you've got no body weight.
Yep. This is very, very true. But okay, Judas, I think we can all agree, was a pothead, and there's nothing wrong with that, because actually, in the Bible, he's kind of a cool character, because even if you believe in all that stuff, he was meant to do all that shit anyway. So
I think he gave over Jesus, because basically, this is the scene. Jesus and the apostles are passing around the joint, a big one. And they're all going around the circle, and Judas doesn't get any. They always he's like, give me a fucking. They always they just skimp out on Judas, and he feels that fuck these guys, they didn't give me enough, and so he goes to the fucking Romans and say, see that fucking guy over there? He's a bit stoned. It's yeah, that fucking guy over there. They don't fucking share. Which one? I'll show you. And he came up to Jesus, and he's like, he forgot what he was fucking doing. He's like, hey, Jesus, mwah, mwah, mwah. And, that must be him. I don't know what I'm fucking saying. Somebody stop.
That could possibly be an explanation.
Yeah.
But I kind of like your theory that it could the Bible itself could just be, the earliest diary of a bunch of guys getting stoned and doing stupid shit.
That Jesus was misquoted. It was, he who is without sin, go and get stoned.
I must be without sin, because I'm...
There you are, you see. And on that bombshell, as Alan Partridge would say, I think it's time for everybody to say goodnight. This has been London After Midnight. So, a few final words from Midnight Goddess?
Well, it has been a blast. Thank you, Alex, for having me on your show, and I hope I get to do another one. And it was wonderful meeting you, Milan, and I am now your official stalker.
Hooray!
And good night from
one
Rob.
more to add to the list. One more to add to the list.
And a goodbye from Rob.
Good night, folks. And remember, why drink and drive when you can smoke and fly?
I applaud that. And a good night from Milan.
The sky will bleed fire one day, and I will descend from the clouds like a terrible writhing mass of tentacled death to embrace you with a loving smile. I had a lot of fun.
Excellent. Okay. Well, good night from London YouTube. Good night, everyone.